Hi, my name is Cedro Vado, and we're talking about the California Indian genocide, boarding schools, and the continuous struggle for recognition. This is personally what my topic on my research paper was on. I decided to do this because I feel like not a lot of people know necessarily what goes on or the history of California Indians. As we know, this is a continuous struggle today. They're still feeling the after effects of boarding schools and also the after effects of genocide, and it's very difficult to get recognized if you haven't been recognized in the past, as you need to have excessive proof and show that your tribe has been a tribe for historically so long, and that can be difficult as many records are tarnished or destroyed, especially during a time of war. Then many of these records can be lost. And California is usually known, I feel like, as a very diverse place, which it can be. It holds many cultures. It's one of the biggest economies in the world, and it can literally be its own sovereign country on its own. But of course, it won't become separate from the U.S. But although there are many diverse cultures, there is one that is always excluded, which in this case is always California Indians. There are many tribes that continue to suffer from California Indian genocides and the Indian boarding schools, and many Native people and cultures, and they still they still suffer a lot of trauma from what happened and from all the destruction. One of the big things that had happened was the gold rush. The gold rush was a huge thing. Now, this was a boom in the U.S. economy. To many, it was an easy way to get rich. Travel to the U.S., travel to California, look for gold, and then get rich. It goes a lot deeper than that. When the gold rush had happened, there was a huge quote unquote Indian problem, how the U.S. stated it. Now, this Indian problem was because there was a lot of foreigners trying to get into Native American land, that when they tried to scare away the natives, and the natives would fight back, as it is their own land to protect. And when they fought back, then the natives were considered savage and they were considered to be a problem. Now, this caused the U.S. to get involved, and they actually supported these killings and genocides, where they would actually support and hire militias to help clear off Indian off their land and to allow more foreigners to come into their land and invade, and in order to collect more gold and bring in more people. A huge sign of genocide also was the California missions. I didn't really highlight this during my research paper, but this was a topic that I'm really passionate about as well. I personally didn't know that the missions were created on so much bloodshed and also so much destruction. The missions were created on basically Native American slavery. Conquistadors came on into California to invade, and they created these missions to spread the word of God and kind of assimilate the Native Americans into their own religion. But they did it by force, by taking away their families, their wives, their children, and to force the men to basically build and construct the missions on their own. And this caused there to be a huge upset and a huge separation of families as well. For example, there was the Kumuyaw Revolt and the destruction of Mission San Diego. In 19, I believe it was 1769, a Spanish priest, Junipero Sierra, established his first mission in Kumuyaw territory. Now, the Kumuyaw wanted to trade with the Spanish, but they were greedy, as we know, and the Kumuyaw were angered by the Spanish in 1775. Now, this caused them to attack the mission, which Indians began by willingly coming to the mission to get baptized and later burned down the village. And it was just a sign of rebel. And it just showed that they were tired of all this nonsense. Another huge sense of cultural genocide was education and boarding schools. Now, the creation of these boarding schools, their literal mission statement was kill the Indian and save the man. They wanted to, they basically want to separate thousands of Native American children from their families, and they wanted them, they wanted them put into these state-run institutions, Parents who refused could be legally imprisoned, and they were deprived of resources, like funds or food, clothing, which were scarce already on reservations as is. And 3 of 25 Indian boarding schools, were actually in California, and these were put in place to get rid of the culture traditions and basically replace them with white ideologies, which in this case is religion, or it was common to also bathe new students in kerosene and cut their hair, as their hair was a sign of their old heritage. And it was a simulation program which children were also punished for speaking their native language. They were given names and were replaced with white names and Christian names, and there was reports of there being physical and even including sexual abuse on those schools. Um, Many protested for years for the right to educate their own children, and actually in 1978 they finally won the right to prevent family separation. 1978, almost 100 years after the actual input of boarding schools, which is mad. And nowadays it's actually very difficult to basically reawaken the dead language. There has to be an elder that has spoken that language before, and to kind of reawaken it and reinstitute it into education systems or high schools as well. Um, and it can be very difficult for now a tribe to get recognized as an official tribe and a sovereign tribe, to have their own sovereign power and sovereign funds from the U.S. government, because they have to have extreme documentation that of how historic and how traditional their tribe is actually, or it actually has been. And it's just crazy because I feel like California needs to address these intergenerational traumas and input it into these tribes in California. And yeah, that concludes my presentation.